4.4 factoring. So 4.4 will be broken up into two parts. So this is part 1. I'm going to be doing the first two. I'm going to do the first 3. You guys are going to do the next 3 by yourself. So first thing, maybe you've already found this, but when I'm looking at these equations, these are all in standard form. When I'm looking at these, there's no number besides 1, or in this case, -1 in the front. That makes our life a little bit easier. Now, if I'm going to be factoring, remember, something came about from this. This is where we started from. My factors of x squared are just 1 and 1. 20, now I'm going to look at 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Now, again, I can either use guess and check, or else I can use my box method. Now, when the factor here is 1, it's a little bit easier because these 1s are not changing these numbers at all. So I'm looking for numbers that add together to get this 9. So I'm looking at this. 4 plus 5 is equal to 9. So I'm going to guess that first. So here is me guessing. Now if I want to check, remember it's these two numbers multiplied together. So this would give me a 5x, this gives me a 4x, and together that gives me my 9x. So that's completely factored. Now, if I want to do the box method way, but again, when there's no number in front, the box method way kind of takes a little bit longer, only because of the actual drawing of the box. Now, my first term is x squared. This is -72. So remember, the box method way, we multiply these two together. So I'm looking at factors of -72. Notice how that's not changing this. Same thing if I did it here. That's not changing the factors. So I'm going to write down the factors of 72. I'm looking to see this has to be negative. I'm adding to get a positive, so I'm going to put the negative with one of these because they have to multiply to get a -72. So which one is these add together so that they get a +14? Nope, here, these two add together to get a +14. So again, I break that up in my boxes. So when I'm factoring this, I'm looking at what can I pull out in these spots. So I'm looking across. Here, I'm looking to see both of these are divisible by 9. So this would give me a 9, just a 9, sorry. Here, what do these both have in common? These both have an x in common. Here, what do these both have in common? These both have an x in common. What do these both have in common? They both have a -4 in common. Actually, kidding, these both have an 18 in common. So this is where I want to check. -4 times 9, that doesn't multiply to get -72. So then I have to look at what else do these two have in common? These actually have an 18 in common, so I can take out 18 here. So now I have my x minus 4 and x plus 18. Now if you notice, because of no number out in front, that's the same as these two numbers we found right here because there's no number out in front. Now what if we have a negative out in front? If we have a negative out in front, the first thing we want to do before anything else is take out that negative. And when we take out that negative, that changes all of the signs here. Now I'm going to factor this method because again, when there's no number out in front of the x squared, I feel like it's a little easier. Here are my factors of 12. So it's a +12, but I have to add to get negative. So that means both of these have to be negative. So a negative times a negative would give me a positive. -1 times -12 is a +12. But, oh, look at that. If I add those together, that would give me a -13. So these two numbers then, if I want to guess those two numbers first, x minus 1, x minus 12, and I check my outside, so this gives me a -12x, this gives me a -1x, and together, those give me a -13. And again, that's negative right there. If I go back, you have to make sure to also, we factored out this negative at the front. This negative has to be there. That -1 still has to be represented. So this right here is my final answer. I need you to try to do D, E, and F for now. Try to do D, E, and F. So what we have here, factors of 40 would give me 4 and 10. So if I guess here, my check it, this gives me a 10x, this gives me my 4x, and together that gives me a +14. Here, the factors of 30, both of these have to be negative because I'm adding to get a negative, but multiplying to get positive. So these still have to multiply to get positive. Check my outside, -6x, check my inside, and together, those give me my -11. So again, if I were to check this, it would be these two numbers right here. that together have to add to get that middle. Here I took out a negative first, that switches the signs. So factors of negative 32. So 2 and 16. Why did I write 8 there? Not sure why I wrote 18 and 8. Check my inside, check my outside. So this becomes a negative 16x. This gives me 2x, and together that gives me a negative 14. Again, you need to have that negative 1 out in front. That's x plus 2x minus 16. So now, actually, even before we do this, the first question we should always ask ourselves when we are factoring is there anything that these have in common that I could factor out first? So I'm looking at these two right here. I have to look at the 6 and 9. Can those be divided by anything? Well, if I divide them both by 3, that will work. And then I look at my n squared and my n. Can those two be divided by anything? They could be both divided by n. So I can take out a 3 and an n. So again, factoring is just undoing my multiplication. Undoing multiplication is the same thing as like dividing. So if I divided both of these by 3n, 6 divided by 3 is 2. N squared divided by n is just 1n. Plus n divided by 3, or 9 divided by 3 is 3. N divided by n is 1. You can always check your work, just like you can check your work up here. So if I distribute this in, just like how we've been practicing, 3 times 2 give me 6. N times n is n squared. 3 times 3 is 9, and then there's 1n. So that was my original. So I can always check my work. Now here, I want to look to see, do these have anything in common? I know that all of these are divisible by 4. I cannot take out an x because this one does not have an x. They all have to have at least one of something. So if I divide this by 4, I'm left with the x squared. Divide by 4, I'm left with a 5. And divide by 4, I'm left with a 14. Oh, this one also has an x, sorry. So if I look at this, now I can continue to factor like above. So I'm looking for my factors of 14 because of the fact that there's like a 1 right here. Once we take that out, we're focusing just on this portion, just like how we did with the negative. That's 1 and 14, 2 and 7. Okay, one of these have to be negative. So I'm going to put the negative with a smaller number because this middle term has to add together to get positive. So these right here, those add together to get me a positive 5. So when I write this out at 4, I can have x minus 2 and x plus 7. Remember, you can always check your work on these problems. If I check my outside, this gives me my 7x. Inside is negative 2x. Together, that gives me my positive 5. And then you still need to have that 4 on the outside. Here, this one's a little bit more tricky. So now I'm looking at this. I'm going to do two things in the same step. Both of these have a 7 that I can take out. So I'm going to take out a 7. However, I'm going to rewrite this so that it looks like this. I'm not changing this actual problem at all. I'm not changing this problem at all. What I want to see is, are there any numbers that I could multiply to get negative 21 that could add to get 0? Because there's no n term. So my factors of 21 are 1 and 21, 3 and 7. I have the negative with 1. None of these add together to get 0. So then this right here is my farthest I can simplify to. Actually, that's I can't take an n out of that. Oh, right there. That right there is my farthest I can simplify to. So right now I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to do D, E, and F. So this first one, you can first take out a 9. All of these are divisible by 9. Now I'm looking for numbers that multiply to get negative 2, add to get positive 1. So that'd be a positive 2 and a negative 1. So again, I'm checking my outside. This would give me negative 1x, inside 2x. Together, they add to get that 1. If you want to keep checking, you can multiply this whole thing out. So 2 times negative 1, that's my negative 2. X times x, that's x squared. Here, I can take out a 4. All of these are divisible by 4. Looking for numbers that multiply to get negative 3, add to get 2. So the factors would be 3 and 1. Again, if I check, my outside here would give me negative 1x. Here it gives me 3x. And together, I have a positive 2x. I add them together. Final answer. Here, both of these have a 4 and an x in common. So once I take out that 4x, divide by 4, I have 1. X squared divided by x, I have 1x left over. 28 divided by 4 is 7. Remember, you can always check this by multiplying in. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times 7 is negative 28x. What's the difference between why did you do 0 here and why did I do not 0 here? The difference between this is once I factored out the 7, I'm still left with an exponent here. If you're still left with an exponent inside your parentheses, just like in this location, all these other locations, you have to see if you can still factor it. Here in this problem and in this problem, once I took out that exponent, I'm just left with 1 inside. If you're left with just 1 inside, you don't have to check again. So there you go. Bing, bada, boom. Easy peasy lemon squeezing. Part 1 of factoring. Have a great day.